So if you are a literature student and you're trying to understand literary terms, it can be a lot of them, but all of those lots, we have put them together in a series and we are explaining each one of them one after the other. So if you're something like this, or you are preparing for literature exams in WAEC, NECO, NABTEB, GCE, JAMB or UTME, this tutorial is for you. So follow us from the beginning to the end and you'll see that there will be proper understanding of features of drama. Let's start. Welcome to Heshbon Academy. So today we'll be talking about features of drama, and this is like the third part of our series of understanding what literary terms is in its totality. So number one, features of drama. So we have characterization. So characterization is the creation of characters with their flaws and strengths. So characterization is the creation of characters with their flaws and strengths. So characterization is when the author or the playwright sits down and says, oh, how's this character going to look like? How's this my character going to look like? What are going to be his flaws? What is going to be his strengths? Everything. It's just the art of creating characters with their flaws and their strengths. Next thing is a dialogue. So a dialogue is a conversation between two people used in a drama. So dialogue is just a conversation between this guy, conversation with another character. That's what the dialogue is. So the next thing is dramatic monologue. So dramatic monologue is when a character addresses an absent listener. Some of the words are addressed to a character who is not present at the scene. Now, many times, people mistake dramatic monologue for soliloquy, and we'll get there in a minute, but let me explain what dramatic monologue is. Dramatic monologue is when one character is addressing another character, but that character is not on the scene. That character is not on the scene. That character is not there. So it's like as if he's talking to the audience. So he's like addressing an absent listener, but that listener is not there. And then some of the words are addressed to a character who is not present at the scene. So a dramatic monologue is when a character is talking. He's obviously talking to somebody, but that character is not on the stage at that point in time. So he feels like he's talking straight to the audience. It reveals the character of the person speaking. It reveals the heart of the character talking. So if you look at the image on the right hand side, you will see that, it explains what a dramatic monologue is one speaker speaking to an absent listener. Many times they're always alone talking, but they are usually talking directly to the audience, but it looks like they are addressing another character, but that character is not on the scene. So it's an uninterrupted speech, and it reveals the intent of that character on stage. Now the next thing is playwright or a dramatist. So who is a playwright? A playwright is a person who writes plays. A playwright is a person who writes plays. A dramatist is a person who writes plays that is, at the end of the day, acted on stage. That's what a dramatist is. The difference between a playwright and a dramatist, before we move on to prompter, the difference is that a dramatist is a person who writes plays or dramas, but there is usually a focus on the literary aspects of the work. They can be involved in the production or direction of their plays, but their primary focus is on the writing itself. A playwright, however, is someone who writes plays specifically for performance on stage. They may not necessarily be concerned with the literary aspects of the work, but rather the practical aspect of how it will be performed. So a dramatist is someone who writes plays, but he pays more attention. He can be involved in the production, he can be involved in the direction, but their major focus is on the writing. But a playwright is somebody who writes primarily for stage. He writes for stage drama, and then they might not be so concerned about the literary aspects of the work like a dramatist is concerned. So moving on to the next thing, a prompter. A prompter is a person who reminds the characters of their lines when they miss them. They stay at the wings of the stage. So a prompter is usually at the wings of the stage. That's when it comes to a stage drama. But many times when it comes to movies, prompters are always close to the characters when they are acting, but they are not really, you don't really see them in the movie itself, except maybe you're watching the BTS, like behind the scenes and all of that. Before you majorly hear their voice when somebody forgets their line. So that's what the prompter is. Now wings is the part of the stage that is hidden from the audience. So those parts of the stage that is hidden from the audience where characters can come out from and all of that. So characters come out from backstage, but then there are wings like inside of the stage that is hidden from the audience that can also be used as a backstage. So an aside is when other characters on the stage do not take part in the conversation between a character and the audience. Now that's the difference between a dramatic monologue and an aside. Dramatic monologue is there is nobody on stage at all, and then he's talking to another character. That character is not present on stage, so he now feels like he's talking to the audience. But an aside is different. Aside is when there are other characters on stage, but you just see that the spotlight is on one character who is talking to other characters, or is trying to like have a conversation, but other characters are not in that conversation. It's like they are oblivious that he's talking, so it now feels like now the character is now straightly talking to the audience. So aside is when there are other characters on stage, but then the character who is talking at that point in time, other characters pretend like he's not talking. They don't even look at his side. They don't even flinch when he speaks. So he's speaking straightly to the audience. He's not referring to any other character. Like I said before, he's not referring to any other character on that stage. He feels like he's talking straight to the audience, and all the other characters on stage don't even interfere with anything that he's saying. They just go about their business and do as if he's not talking. That's what an aside is. So moving on, soliloquy. Soliloquy is when the character speaks to himself, and it should not be confused with a dramatic monologue. Now, a dramatic monologue is when the character is talking to another character, but that character is not there. It's like he's talking to an absent listener, but that listener is not there. But a soliloquy is when you are talking to yourself. So the character is talking to himself. Now the picture depicts what a soliloquy is. The character is talking to himself, and then he's revealing the inner thoughts of the character. It's like he's speaking his thoughts out loud. That's what a soliloquy is. So now moving on to the next thing, we have dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is when the audience know or have more information about the particular action than the characters on stage, or the characters on set, or characters in the movie. So the audience know, for example, we all know that there are ghosts inside this room. Don't enter the room. And everybody is screaming in front of their TV, wow, this guy is foolish. Don't enter there. Don't enter there. Of course, the character in the movie or on the stage doesn't have any idea that there's something inside the room that he should run away from. So that's dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is when the audience know more or have more information about a particular action than the characters on stage. Now, verbal irony is what verbal irony is. It's like saying the opposite of what you mean. Oh, this I'm talking to somebody, maybe I'm saying something about maybe Tyrion Lannister now. We all know that Tyrion Lannister is a dwarf in the movie Game of Thrones, and I'm saying, oh, I like the fact that Tyrion is 6 feet tall. Of course he's not 6 feet tall. That's like verbal irony. Now, the next thing is rehearsal. Rehearsal is a series of practice taken by the cast and the crew to prepare for the drama. So there's dress rehearsal. Dress rehearsal is different because it is the last aspect of the rehearsal where the costumes are used. Now, if you look at the picture on my left hand side, you'll see a preparation for a dress rehearsal. You see the actors, and you see someone that's acting as maybe the director or the set manager or something. So dress rehearsal is like the last aspect of the rehearsal where costumes are used. Now, an audition, everybody should know what an audition is, what I will still explain. Audition is a test given out to cast to know how well they can act. An audition is nowadays, in those days, people go to production companies to go and audition for roles. But nowadays, I think they audition for roles online now. Just video yourself and then send it to the production manager, and they can decide whether or not you are capable for that role. So that's what an audition is like a test given to the cast to know how best they can act in that role that they have to be given. So the next thing is interlude. So interlude is the break between a play, so that the character can rest. So now, interlude is like when it applies to stage drama, It's just like a maybe 5 minutes break, 10 minutes break, in between as the play is going on, so that the characters can probably take a cup of water, rest a little bit, stretch their legs, ease of tension. So that's what interlude is. Now, foreshadowing, like I said before, I use ChatGPT to generate many of the pictures that you see in my slides. So ignore every form of misspelling. Just follow the spelling in the written parts. Don't follow the spelling in the pictures, because many times they are always giving me wrong spelling, and no matter what I use to change the spelling, they refuse. So let's move on. So foreshadowing is when what is going to happen in the future is foretold. So if you look at the picture, just look at the image, you will see that the foreshadowing is giving a hint of what is going to happen in the future. Because many times it can be a dream, it can be a vision, it can be anything. It can be anything. Like, for example, I like one foreshadowing in Game of Thrones where the Red Witch tells Arya Stark that she's going to close blue eyes, almond eyes, and green eyes, I think. So she foreshadows the death of the Night King, foreshadows the death of the Freys, House Frey, and foreshadows the death of Littlefinger. So that's the movie Game of Thrones. So that's foreshadowing, is when the future is being told. So flashback is a dramatic technique that is used to look back into past events. It's used as a reference to past actions or events. So flashback is you're looking at your past. So it's where it's a narrative technique or dramatic technique where we see the past lives or the past situations of the characters. So it helps us to understand what's going on in the present. So eavesdropping is what we know eavesdropping to be. Eavesdropping is when a character listens to a conversation secretly without being invited. Many times problem ensues after that, but let's move on. A play within a play. A play within a play is a short play put in the main play that has a theme that supports the main theme of the entire play. So many times flashbacks can be a play within a play. So many times a play within a play is a short play that is put inside of the main play. It just gives a supportive push to the main theme of the play. So it helps us to understand the theme more. It supports the major theme of the totality of the play. Next thing is suspense. So suspense is a state of prolonged anxiety and expectation in the mind of the audience or the reader. So that suspense is when adrenaline is shooting up your veins and then you're like, what is going to happen next? What is going to happen next? If you watch season movies and all those movies where they will release one season every 2 years, many times suspense dies and resurrects at every thought of the movie. So that's suspense. And so Deus ex machina is when supernatural is used, or supernatural means is used to solve issues in a play. Is used to prefer a long-awaited solution to the crisis. It's derived from the Greek words that mean God from a machine. So in the olden days, before the emergence of VFX and all of the other things that people use in movies nowadays, on stage there is something they call God from the machine, otherwise known as Deus ex machina. So when they want to do something dramatic and maybe something supernatural appears to save somebody, like in the picture we see that an angel, because I don't know if angels age now, but this angel looks old, and I don't think it's God, because I don't think God looks this old. But here in the image, so we see that something that looks like a god comes down to save the people that are bound there. So that's like Deus ex machina. But in those days they used machines because they didn't have the luxury of computers to create all those effects that we have now. So that's what Deus ex machina is. So now let's move on to the next thing. I hope you understand. If you have questions, you can put it in the comments. We would be willing to answer all of them. Now you're moving on to poetry. Now poetry, elements of poetry. So but then let's define what poetry is. So poetry is a collection of poems. A poem is a piece of creative writing written or composed in a verse form. So a verse is a form of writing arranged in lines, each forming a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. According to Swinburne, poetry is a concrete and artistic expression of the human mind. Now, poetry is concrete in the sense that it uses convoluted language many a time. Most times poetry uses convoluted language. They use rhyme, they use rhythm, they use rhyme scheme. They use that's where stressed and unstressed syllables come in. Now, if there is any genre of literature that I know that makes students' hearts palpitate, like the hearts of students palpitate at the sound of poetry, is because many times they have to do with meter, stressed syllables, unstressed syllables, and then just the entirety of syllables is even stressing to imagine. But don't worry, we would explain each and every one of them as we go. The Lord helping us. So moving on to the next thing is panegyric. So panegyric is a form. So we are going to types of poems. So panegyric is a form of poem, or is a poem that praises someone's virtues or quality. Now if you look at the image, we see that the people around are singing some kinds of panegyric. If you're Nigerian and if you are from the Yoruba tribe of Nigeria, they have what they call oriki. Oriki is like a panegyric custom made for each individual many times, and then they use that to praise somebody's virtues, or maybe if the person is angry or annoyed, they sing those kinds of songs, and then the person's anger goes down or subsides. So panegyric is a poem that praises someone's virtues or qualities. A lyric is an emotional poem that can be sung. That's what a lyric is, an emotional poem that can be sung. So it is derived from the Greek word lyrikos, meaning a poem that is meant to be sung to a lyre. It is highly emotional, full of thoughts and of feelings. So I believe that lyrics is an emotional song that will make you think a lot. So that's what a lyric is. Now, ballad. Ballad is a narrative poem that can be sung. It's derived from village festivals and are not written, but they are handed down orally from generation to generation. So there are two types of ballad. We have traditional or popular ballad, and we have literary ballad. So a ballad is a narrative poem that can be sung, is derived from village festivals, and they are not written, but they are handed down orally from generation to generation. So ballads are poems that tell a story. So for example, in Nigeria, or most Nigerian African folk tales have a thing to do with tortoise being a wise guy, and tortoise always outsmarting everybody. And for every tribe, like I know of the Igbo tribe, they have, their own ballads, like narratives, stories that are sung, as poems. They are just sung like that. So that's what a ballad is. There are two kinds of ballads. There's a traditional or popular ballad. So these are ballads that are like companions of folk tales. So they tell stories that are told by mouth, and the literary ballad is a narrative poem but is written. I know there is one that I read one time titled The Proud King. I can't remember who wrote it now. So that literary ballad is not the one that we sing, it's just someone that has been written down. That's what a literary ballad is. Moving on, we have elegy. Elegy is a poem written in memory of a dead man. It was developed from the Greek word elegos, meaning a lament, a song of mourning, a song of death. So elegy is written. Many people mistake elegy and dirge. So I will talk about dirge as well, like very shortly. So elegy is a poem written in remembrance. You are trying to remember someone who has died. It's like a song of lamentation, a song of mourning, and a song of death. Now a dirge is different. A dirge is sung. Elegy is written. Dirge is sung to mourn a dead man. It's usually sung in burial ceremonies. So the difference between elegy and dirge is that elegy is written in remembrance of a dead man who must have died maybe some time ago. But a dirge is sung, and is usually sung during the burial ceremony. If you look at the image, we see that elegy is a reflective tribute to the dead, while dirge is usually a loud public funeral song. So elegies can be private reflection, can be calm, while dirges can be lamentations, loud and emotional, because they are being sung in burial ceremonies when emotions are high and all of that. So an ode is a poem of address. It consists of the addresser, who is the writer, and the addressee, who is the person or the thing that the poem is referred to. A poem, the word originated from the Greek word iode, which means to sing. So a writer of odes is usually longing for something that he lost or something that is far away. I know there's one popular one known as Ode to the Nightingale. So ode is like a letter in poetry form. we are addressing something. The writer is addressing something, he's trying to describe something, he's trying to describe something that he's longing for, something that he feels is too far away from him. So that's what an ode is. Now moving on to the next thing is a sonnet. So we're still talking about types of poems here. So a sonnet is derived from the Latin word sonus, meaning sound, and it's a poem of 14 lines whose rhythm is iambic pentameter. Now I get it. When people are already hearing iambic pentameter, trochaic, people are already saying, we are getting to the hard part. 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 So there are 3 kinds of sonnets. We have Shakespearean sonnet, Miltonic sonnet, and Petrarchian sonnet. So Shakespearean sonnet is, like we said before, it's established that sonnet is a poem of 14 lines whose rhythm is iambic pentameter. So we are going to talk about that in the coming tutorials, but let's just face the types that we have now. So Shakespearean sonnet is a type that was named after Shakespeare, who was the first to use it. It consists of 3 quatrains and a final rhyming couplet. We are going to talk about the different kinds of poems, or the different types of poems, like looking at their lines, number of lines. So a sonnet or Shakespearean sonnet has 3 quatrains and a final rhyming couplet. So quatrains are poems of 4 lines, while a couplet is a poem of 2 lines. So a quatrain is a group of 4 lines, and the rhyme scheme is usually A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, G G. So that's iambic pentameter for the 3 quatrains, and then another kind for the couplet. So it's Shakespeare that started using it. So, and it was named after Shakespeare. So Shakespeare actually wrote a total of 154 sonnets, which is wild, but that's what he did. Now moving on to the next thing is Miltonic sonnet. So Miltonic sonnet it has a rhyme scheme of ABBA, ABBA, CDE, and CDE. So how we know Miltonic sonnets is majorly by their rhyme schemes. That's how we know a Miltonic sonnet. So the next thing is Petrarchian sonnet. Petrarchian sonnet, Petrarch wrote 317 sonnets, which is higher than Shakespearean sonnet anyway. And its rhyme scheme is ABBA, ABBA, CD, CD, CD. So we'll explain all of these things. Don't let it bother you. We'll explain everything. So a Miltonic sonnet is a combination of an octave and a sestet. An octave is an 8-line poem. A sestet is a 6-line poem. So if we do 8 plus 6, that's 14 lines. So that's Miltonic sonnet. So moving on to a limerick. A limerick is a humorous poem of 5 lines. You can say it's a humorous quintet, because a quintet is a poem of 5 lines. It's usually a witty poem with the rhyme scheme AABBA. That's what a limerick is. Now moving on to the next thing, we have a nonsense poem. Right? We are still under types of poems. A nonsense poem is a poem with little or no meaning. Like, it's actually a nonsense poem. It's a poem with no sense at all. Little sense or no sense at all. So a nature poem is a poem that extols and praises nature. So a nature poem is just a poem that extols and praises nature. Now, you should know the difference between a nature poem and a pastoral poem. A pastoral poem is a poem that talks about shepherds and herdsmen, etc. And it's a poem whose subject is rural people. So if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, you will see what a poem is. Even though the image is trying to make you see nature, but many times the nature is always under rural life, and then shepherding nature, herdsmen, sheep, and all of that. That's what a pastoral poem is. An idyll is a short, simple, rustic poem. Short, simple, rustic. When we say rustic has to do with rural people. So that's what rustic. So when you say that it's very short and it's so simple and it's rustic, it's most likely an idiom. So a ditty is a short and simple lyric. Now, if you go back to what we defined lyric as, we defined lyric as an emotional poem that can be sung, and it's highly emotional, full of thoughts and feelings. Now, a ditty is just a short and a simple lyric. That's what a ditty is. Now, lullaby is a poem that is used to put babies to sleep. We have many of them. We have Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. We have A lot of them actually. I can't remember lullabies, but that's what a lullaby is. So now a narrative poem is a long poem that tells a story. So a narrative poem is somehow similar to a ballad, depending on the kind of ballad it is. But a narrative poem is a long poem that tells a story. Alright, so the difference between a narrative poem and a ballad is that a ballad has more traditional heritage in a way. Yes, because they said it's derived from village festivals and they are handed down orally from generation to generation. So a ballad has more traditional heritage, but narrative poem might not be as traditional as ballads are. So next thing is didactic poem. I think in one of my tutorials, if it's not in this tutorial, I spoke about didactic. The didactic poem is a poem that conveys an instruction or teaches a moral. So when a poem, I feel like many poems that are not nonsense poems convey an instruction or teach a moral in a way, as long as they're not comedy. So haiku is a poem of Japanese origin. It's a comical poem with 3 lines of 17 syllables. So if you see a poem that looks Japanese or has a Japanese origin, is a poem of 3 lines of 17 syllables. If they ask you that question, just know that's haiku. That's my guy. Now, prothalamion is a poem used for celebrating an impending marriage that is in honor of the bride and the groom about to get married. Many times, people don't really understand what a prothalamion is, but if you come to Nigeria, in the Yoruba tribe of Nigeria, they do prothalamion a lot. They compose, they have a lot of prothalamions, and they sing the bride to sleep many times. They do a lot of things. They sing, they dance, all of those songs, all of those dancing when the bride is coming to, get engaged and all of that. They are called prothalamions. Epithalamion is a poem in celebration of marriage. So that's after the marriage has happened and the people are trying to celebrate. So that's what epithalamion is. If you look at the image, you see a typification of a prothalamion and an epithalamion. So epigram is a poem that is witty and filled with paradox. They are short and might take the form of a couplet or a quatrain. Couplet is a 2-line poem, quatrain is a 4-line poem. So epigram is witty and then it is paradoxical in a way, because it might make no sense when you read it, but if you look at it well enough, you see that there can be some sense in it. So that's paradox. So they are short and they might take the form of a couplet or a quatrain. Next is epitaph. So the smear on the image on my left hand side is me trying to remove an eye that ChatGPT refused to remove in the image, but I tried either way. It's not so noticeable. Well, being noticeable is what's the word now? Is relative. So moving on, epitaph. So epitaph is much like an elegy, but it is shorter, and they commonly appear on gravestones and can also be humorous. They have no specific rules or rhyme scheme. So if you look at the gravestone, it's in loving memory of our beloved elder Kwame, a life of wisdom and peace. Your stories live on. That doesn't make sense, but that's what ChatGPT thinks an epitaph is. So an epitaph is like an elegy. We explained before that an elegy is written. So an elegy, but it's shorter, and they usually appear on gravestones, and they can be funny. Okay, they can be funny. So free verse. A free verse is a poem with no rules, and writers can do whatever they choose, and it's a poem with no reading or rhyme scheme. So a free verse is a free verse because it does not have reading, does not have rhyme scheme, and writers can do anything they want to do with their language, with their diction. That's why it's called a free verse. Now, a couplet is a 2-line poem or stanza. A tercet is a 3-line poem or stanza. A quatrain is a 4-line poem or stanza. A quintet is a 5-line poem or stanza. I feel like if you know French numbers, you'll be able to fully understand all of this. So a sestet is a 6-line poem or stanza. A septet is a 7-line poem or stanza. An octave is an 8-line poem or stanza. A dizaine is a 10-line poem or stanza. So if you look at the image, you can see quatrain, quintet, sestet, septet, octave, dizaine. So you will see the differences between that. So that's it for this class, and I hope we understood everything that was being said. If you did not understand it. You can ask me questions in the comments. I would be very, very available to answer all of your questions. And you can go back to watch this video again. You can go back to watch lesson 1 and lesson 2 in anticipation of lesson 4, which should come out very soon. So see you in my next class. Next class, we're talking about the features of poetry, and then we'll explain all those iambic pentameter, trochaic, rhyme scheme, reading, all of those things that makes us scared. So those are the things that we are going to explain in our next class. So don't miss it. See you there. Goodbye.